Hello. For the London Wavelength Radio Hour, I'm Joe Badriskie. For the next hour, we will both verbally and musically trace the creation of Genesis, a band formed from 5 friendships in 1965 at England's Charterhouse School. We'll discover several very definite stages of Genesis, considering personnel changes and the musical manifestations made possible by these changes. We'll hear of some of the largest and most elaborate world tours ever conceived, with custom-designed stages, patented laser effects, and the unique feature of the tour-only guest musicians, drummer and guitarist, one of the many ways in which Genesis has dealt creatively with the changes from the past. Genesis started as a 5-man band, and then there were 4, and now there are 3. Join us in conversation with Tony Banks, Michael Rutherford, and Phil Collins.
We're waiting for you. Come and join us now. We need you with us. Come and join us now.
Charterhouse, a public school near Godalming, Surrey, was the backbone of Genesis. The group evolved from the wreckage of 2 attempted school bands. Anthony Phillips and Michael Rutherford came from the Anon, and Tony Banks with Peter Gabriel from Garden Wall. The boys came to Charterhouse between 1963 and 65. The first demos were cut at a friend's homemade studio, using primitive and borrowed equipment. Jonathan King, the band's first producer-manager, despite being somewhat pessimistic about their future, paid for a second demonstration tape. King then offered them a 5-year contract, which the parents of the musicians would not allow. Genesis signed a 1-year contract with a 1-year option. I asked Tony Banks what it was like in those early days, just as Genesis was getting started.
We played sort of in school bands and things, but I mean Genesis itself didn't come together until about 1967, 8 really. So it's more like 10 years. I don't like to think of it as being too long, you know, we sort of feel a bit too old.
I know you said 12 years, I started feeling old and my shoulders went.
Yeah, I mean, originally we were just guys who wrote songs, you know. I used to write songs with Peter Gabriel, that was, and Mike used to write songs with Anthony Phillips, and we decided to make a tape of our songs together. We managed to get, through these tapes, we managed to get an English producer called Jonathan King interested in our music. And one thing led to another, and we made 2 singles and 1 LP with him. At that stage, we'd never played on the road, and it was a very amateur, part-time thing. I don't think we really considered it to be our careers at that stage. It was just something that was a lot of fun, and if it had taken off, it would have been, you know, a nice thing to do in the holidays, as it were. Lights from a curious sky, it has begun.
Discovering that there was already an American group named Genesis, Decca Records insisted that Jonathan King rename his protégés. King refused, but then compromised by removing their name from the album and calling it From Genesis to Revelation. Concept albums hadn't really been heard of yet in those days. Michael Rutherford commented on the transition from a high school band to working musicians.
I still think some of the sort of material and some of the sort of sections in it were, I mean, you know, very good for the time. We had a lot of production problems, you know, we were very inexperienced in a studio. And a fair bit of friction with Jonathan King, although I think there probably would have been with anyone the way we were feeling those days. But I think, I mean, yes, I get very nostalgic when I listen to that album. I think it gave us an amazing opportunity. We were, 16, 17? And to make an album, I mean, now people younger make albums, but in those days, 9 years ago, 10 years ago, you didn't get that opportunity very often. We made the first album in the school holidays, and it really kind of, it whet our appetites, I think, even though we, at the time, we were disappointed with the final result in a way. It excited us as to what we could do, recording-wise, and it kind of set us up for the next stage, which is when we sort of went professional. after a very shaky summer. Everyone was leaving, and no one quite knew what to do. Tony was at university, and Pete wasn't sure whether to go to film school, and it was a long summer when no one quite knew what was happening. And then at the end of it, we went into the next stage, which was actually buying some equipment, preparing to become a live group and playing live gigs. And so I think that was the sort of beginning of the next one, really.
Anthony Phillips left Genesis in July of 1970, just after they had finished the recording of Trespass, their next album. Anthony went off to study classical guitar, orchestration, and piano, and has subsequently released 2 solo albums. Melody Maker magazine ran a small ad looking for the next Genesis drummer. That ad was answered by one Phil Collins. As a child actor, Phil had appeared often on TV, radio, film, and stage. Phil Collins outdrummed 14 other applicants for the job with Genesis. And little did they realize what a useful chap he'd turn out to be. I asked Phil Collins what it was like to apply for a job with Genesis.
I joined the band actually before Trespass came out. Seeing the thing sort of Anthony left and John Mayhew was kicked out about the same, about August, I think it was 1970, which is when the album came out. And I answered an advert in the paper, Melody Maker. Basically, that's what I did. And I knew Tony Stratton Smith, and I thought that maybe I'd even get the gig without an audition, But I had to go with the audition. So
it's a drummer sensitive to acoustic music, isn't it? So you thought, Christ, what's
because I'll call it now. Anyway, went for the audition, and Trespass, I really feel that really has laid the foundations for what we're doing now, very much so, more so than the other one. It's got a very warm vibe to it.
During the first half of 1971, Genesis was on tour constantly, and it was only in June, when Peter Gabriel broke his ankle, that they took time off to record their next album, Nursery Crime. Genesis played their first foreign date in January of 1972 in Brussels. By that time, their albums were already enjoying tremendous success in continental Europe. When we spoke, Tony and Michael commented on the early album success of Genesis, and the aspect of interpreting the music visually, with a large, costumed and choreographed stage show, aided by the theatrics of Peter Gabriel. That's an aspect of Genesis that drew critics away from their music.
Initially when Pete, he just wanted some sort of rather spectacular outfit, which evolved out of the Foxtrot cover, in fact, of wearing a red dress with a fox's head on top, really for little more than sensationalism at the time. And of course we found that having done that, we found ourselves on the front page of Melody Maker, well, we learned quite quickly.
It was unbelievable. We've been playing this, the same area of music for the previous 3 years, and reviews up until then were always said, Genesis also played.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it was like, hey, there's this new group, playing new music sort of thing. And I suppose it did encourage us to sort of push Pete forward and push that area. Although it's the visual production's an area we were always talking about. Had no money to do it, but we were always interested in very much. From the very beginning, I think, really.
On December 11th, 1972, Genesis played their first American date at Brandeis University near Boston. That was followed by a Christmas charity show at Philadelphia's Philharmonic Hall. Having built such an elaborate stage show, Genesis most often found it necessary to tour alone on the bill in concert. This, in turn, led to a slow growth of Genesis fans. Tony, Michael, and Phil told me exactly how difficult it was to take a stand and go it alone.
Very difficult, really. But the problem was that no one would take us and let us use our lights. Goodness, no one knew who we were over here. Let us use our lights and our sound and give us a sound check and let us play for more than 20 minutes sort of thing, So we decided to do it, I suppose, on our terms.
And we could have come in and, it would have been logistically a lot better, to come with a big band.
The point is, we first came to the States after we'd started to headline a little bit in England. We'd had an album that had sort of brushed the top 10 or top 12 or something, in England with Foxtrot. And then we came to the States, and it was kind of, we just felt that we had a show that was something special. And we just wanted to try and present it as is, and the only way we could do it was on our own. I think it's a very difficult way of doing it, because you're very dependent on your cult audience. The only people who come and see you are those people who like you. Well, of course, there's a slight vicious circle involved in that, meaning that no new people ever get to see you if you're not careful. But there's just sort of enough people seem to come every time to make the word-of-mouth thing kind of spread fast, surprisingly fast. In fact, in some areas, it really only took sort of 2 gigs, and we were back there. Particularly in French Canada, Montreal was a very big thing. And the second time we went there, we were quite a big group. It took a lot longer in some cities. In some cities, we've never managed to do it. like Boston, for example, we went there 4 or 5 times, and it just never happened. It's never really grown. Whereas a place like New York took longer, but slow. But it's kind of there now. We can, and it's true in a lot of places now in the country. It's still growing for us so much though in the States. It's been a very, very slow process.
It's been on a bigger scale, kind of the way it was in England when you start just playing clubs, then colleges, and then headlining colleges, and then you got your own concert tour. And so it's the albums sort of accumulated over the years, and it's the same here really. It's ticket sales. It's just a very steady sort of snowball.
We didn't come here until quite late on.
Yeah,
and albums weren't really put out properly by companies until
Sydney England
was the first one really on Atlantic. So it meant we were kind of very much backward in a sense. Foxtrot being a popular album in England was hardly released out here. Sort of.
And it's fair to say that an album like Nursery Crime, which came much earlier, obviously was a big hit in Italy. And even Trespass sold remarkably well in a place like Belgium. So we were starting to sort of grow in lots of other areas before America had even heard of us. Apart obviously from a few people, who I'm sure know who they are. But and Selling England by the Pound was basically our first serious release in this country. And that's why, that's the reason why we're about 4 albums behind where we are in the rest of Europe. So, not the rest of Europe, in Europe.
And that's just the story of the first stage of the band. We'll be back with more conversation from Genesis right after this.
Of a kingdom beyond the skies, but I am lost within this hard world.
I don't mean to be difficult in 79, but I've seen almost everyone's new car line. Some are fair, some not so hot. So I've waited for you. Toyota, what have you got?
For 1979, a brand new Corona. A liftback with all new styling inside and out.
You got a Toyota.
The Corona Liftback, the 5-door sedan that opens up a whole new world of convenience and versatility.
You got a Toyota. Size and comfort, European middle class. Toyota's built to last. You got a Toyota. You got it.
A split back rear seat.
You got it.
Traditional Toyota Corona quality.
You got it, Toyota.
The new 1979 Toyota Corona Liftback. A very different sedan.
Toyota, you got it.
You asked for it. You got it, Toyota.
We're filming a TV commercial in a laundromat, and Mrs. Wills doesn't know she's on camera. Mrs. Wills, I'll give you $50 for that sweatshirt.
Why, sure.
We're doing this to prove a point. I'm going to tear.
I'm gonna tear.
Maverick sweatshirts made from Crestland acrylic and cotton. You can't buy a more durable, more comfortable shirt at any price. Available at most stores where Maverick jeans are sold.
You can have the socks for $10 apiece.
Can you tell me where my country lies? Said the uniform to his true love's eyes. It lies with me, cried the Queen of Maybe. For her merchandise, he traded in his prize.
Genesis produced an album a year from 1970 to 1972. Trespass, Nursery Crime, and Foxtrot. Each very different, but with recurring themes both musically and lyrically. Tony Banks spoke with me about his use of the Mellotron and other keyboards during this stage of Genesis.
Selling England by the pound.
Yeah, maybe. I first got a Mellotron just before Nursery Crime, although I'd used it a little bit on Foxtrot. On Trespass.
Well, come on, it is quarter one.
Yes, right. No, but Nursery Crime had one or two tracks where the Mellotron was a feature. But on Foxtrot, I suppose Watcher of the Skies was is perhaps our most significant track, which used the Mellotron, extensively. But I think I always look at those first three albums, Trespass, Nursery Crime and Foxtrot, as being very much extensions of one another. The most important tracks on each, which were probably Stagnation, Musical Box and Supper's Ready, were definitely continuations one from another of an idea. We had this idea of a kind of an acoustic song that could develop into something much bigger, and Stagnation was our first try at that, and Musical Box was another try, and Supper's Ready was kind of the culmination of that particular attempt, which is not something we've really tried to do very much since, because we felt with Supper's Ready we really achieved something with that kind of idea of the acoustic number growing into something bigger.
I think playing, we did a lot, because we were doing a lot of playing as well, everyone started to play. The change was noticeable from year to year with albums. Right. Doing so many gigs, everyone started getting a bit better on their instruments.
Now, some of those gigs were recorded too. Between Foxtrot and Selling England by the Pound, Buddha came out with a live album that's now quite rare. Did you have anything to say about that? And if so... That was,
originally we were taking quite a long time, I believe, weren't we, between Foxtrot and Selling England by the Pound. We had recorded some radio shows in England. Well, actually, it was for the King Biscuit Flower. They recorded 3 shows, I think, and we mixed them. And they were good quality, and there was a suggestion to tide us over until we'd actually written Selling England, which was...
I think it was a little bit more of a... I felt a little more tricked than that, actually. It was originally put together, they said in Germany, if we have a live album now, we can do it for you. And so, grudgingly, we mixed the tapes together and made a live album for Germany. Well, we were a bit naive in those days, didn't realise if you released an album somewhere, any record company really had the right to release it, who actually had you signed, and so it came out. We weren't that upset about it, but we did feel that it was a bit pointless, the live album, from our own point of view. Looking back on it, I don't think it's that good. A couple of tracks sounded quite nice, but didn't really say anything more than the album versions had done at the time.
So then you're saying it could have been just some profit-seeking on behalf of the record company, too?
Not so much profit-seeking.
Not so much that. They were keen. They thought it would just help us in certain
There was
places.
a certain vibe. We hadn't had... I don't think we were very happy with our studio sound, on record as well. I think there was a kind of energy on the live album that maybe was absent.
But I think, to be honest, we were rather against it being released in the States at the time, if I remember rightly, because we felt that, we kind of, in a sense, we hadn't had an album that had done well in the States, and we were frightened that the first introduction to Genesis might have been this Genesis live album, which we felt was a little bit, a live album works when you know a band well, and you like the music and things. Certainly in those days, live albums weren't that good quality, and it's difficult to introduce a group, via a live album. We didn't want that to happen, really.
In November of '73, Selling England by the Pound came out. And that's probably the album that most people relate to the Genesis sound for. It's the first one that a lot of people picked up on the band. It was where you felt, I guess, you had it more or less together. What were the kinds of things you were writing for that album? Were you stressing new themes, trying to expand?
I think you're talking you're talking obviously American, because it's the first album that the Americans really picked up on, and you talk to someone, each country that first sort of takes Genesis, really something really starts happening. That particular album is always closest Trespass in Belgium. What was
Nursery Crime in Italy.
Nursery Crime in Italy. It's that sort of thing.
You know?
Foxtrot in England, selling England by the pound over here. And so, to the Americans, it's more of a sort of starting point. It's slightly more epic in terms of our albums than I think to us it is.
Mm. I mean, I remember when we were making it, when we were writing it really, and things, it was not an enjoyable period at all. It was a lot of hard work, and we got very frustrated, I think, during that period. But don't think you particularly got frustrated, as far as I remember, kind of endless sort of, you know.
Remember what happened? It was very weird. It was one of the longest writing periods we ever had, and we wrote, I think, almost 2/3 of it.
Well, that's why. That's why Strat came up with the idea. I mean, that's why he was keen anyway. I mean, I remember sort of being with a live album, you know, because we seemed to be taking such a long time over it. We were down at Chessington.
No, it's quite possible. Yeah.
And you know, it was like. You know,
it's an album that has some highs, some good highs, and some.
The sound was a little better, I think. The production was a little better.
It was the first album we got any cleaner production, I think, at all together on.
Foxtrot was very weird, you know. I mean, we had actually 3 different controllers at that point, you know, like at Ireland. We had started off with a guy called Bob Potter, who after 2 or 3 days decided, you know, we didn't like each other, you know, musically. We weren't. And then there was Tony Platts, who came in for a day, I think, and he didn't last longer than a day. And then we had John Burns and Dave Hitchcock. John Burns was the engineer, Dave Hitchcock was the producer. And Dave Hitchcock didn't really do much at all. So those kind of changes made, I mean, Foxtrot's got about 4 or 5 different
yeah, right.
You know, sort of feels to it in a way. I mean, Supper's Ready actually has got.
We recorded the first half with Tony Platt, and the last half with John Burns.
From Farm, I think it is. It's a different engineer.
When it starts getting sort of sounding a bit better, yeah. But I mean, to be honest, I don't think you'll find that's a group favourite, that album. I mean, you know, I don't know. Not
which Selling
is a group favourite? Not
good live
a group favourite. I was, yeah. That's what you mean.
Some good live songs came out.
As a song, well, I think the sound I Know What I Like and stuff. That's
yeah, I think I Know What I Like is great, and I think there are a couple other really good tracks. But I think, you know, it's not my favourite album.
November 74, and Last Down on Broadway came out as a double LP with a concept of sorts. I'm wondering if you could explain a little bit behind the story and the character Rael, is it?
Rael.
Well,
I mean, the guy who wrote the story is now no longer with us. So you want the sort of the deep, you want the 3-hour version of what it's about. If you want the other one, it's best to go out and buy the album and read the cover. And I don't think you'll be much the wiser after that. I mean, you know, I think we prefer to think of it, I think, more as a kind of collection of a lot of songs, you know. There's about 20 songs on that album, and they work very well taken out of context as well as in context.
I think looking back on it, actually, I mean, it's a group favourite, but looking back on it, I think it suffered in the way people reacted to it, because it had a sort of fairly involved concept. It stopped people taking the songs as individual songs, which if they had have done, I think it would have had a better reaction. I think eventually, here we are, you know, 3 or 4 years later, and people got into it, you know, given time. 3 or 4 years.
I mean, and then there were 3 other people who said that, you know, it's a different kind of album for us because it's short songs. But I mean, the Lamb really was, they were linked, weren't they? I mean, it was basically 5 songs aside, you know. 6 songs aside, and they weren't very long, some of them. So it's that the overall plot just sort of immediately put a barrier between the, you know.
And also that was a double album, put a barrier between us and the record company, particularly in the States, where they didn't feel it was the right time.
No casual
They're quite right in a sense, marketing-wise, but that's not how we work. You know, we wanted to do that album at that point. We had a lot of material around. Peter had this story which we were all quite keen to try, and it also left us a lot of room for experimentation musically. I think some of the nicest sections on the album are some of the instrumental passages that were written, well, they were written, a lot of them written before the story, but they were kind of, they express moods very, very strongly. Some of the things like Fly on a Windshield and the Silence on Empty Boats and The Waiting Room, particularly, those sort of bits kind of, I think, one of the most significant things about that album, although they're probably the forgotten tracks in lots of ways, because they're totally unique. I haven't heard many other people do things like that.
If we find albums or single albums very limiting.
I think also another thing worth pointing out on the double album, Lamb, I mean, some people say, okay, it would have been a great single album or something, and I've heard that comment, which is a standard comment about double albums, but one of the songs written as a kind of filler track, if you like, for the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway was The Carpet Crawl, and I think which is probably the most popular track off the album, and you do get this kind of thing sometimes, when you have to create a track out of nothing, it can turn into the best track, there's no reason why it shouldn't,
Of course, the other thing that was going on at that time, which was Peter's unrest. I mean, during the writing of The Lamb, he actually left the band, didn't it, for a few days, because William Friedkin wanted to use him, in sort of to help with some ideas for a screenplay, I think. And that obviously appealed to Pete, chance to write without the touring and stuff. So because we wanted to make a decision, we didn't really want to wait, didn't want to hold the album up because we were all go, So basically he left for a few days, but Friedkin didn't really want the responsibility of splitting the band up, or what he thought was splitting the band up, and so he pulled out his offer and Peter came back. But
I think it's the only show we've ever done that could conceivably be called rock theatre, which is a label that's been applied to us both before that and since that. But I mean, that's the only thing where there was any attempt at acting out a kind of story using sort of various sort of visual forms of interpretation. It was a lot of fun to do. I think it's a unique show, and I think it was, looking back on it, it was great fun. At the time, I think it was probably our least enjoyable show to play.
But it was very long. We did about 7 months touring with it, and it was during that part-time as well that Peter actually decided he was going to leave. So I mean, it was just maybe that. I'm just not convinced that it didn't have something to do with it, because it was the same show every night, apart from these 3 sections which were scattered, and it was an awful lot of touring.
There's only one direction in the faces that I see. It's upward to the sea.
We'll be back for more of our conversation with Genesis right after this.
Like a forest fight for sunlight that takes root in every tree. They are pulled up by the magnet, believing they're free. The carpet crawlers, heed their callers. We gotta get in to get out. We gotta get in to get out. We gotta get in to get out.
I've been dragging through the new car showrooms. All I'm looking for is a new car that really zooms. Now, I don't think that's asking a lot. Toyota, what have you got?
The Celica experience. The 1979 Toyota Celica GT liftback.
You got it, Toyota.
Celica's advanced aerodynamics for better performance, road stability, interior comfort.
You got it, Toyota.
Form and function in perfect harmony.
It's a beautiful thing to see.
You got it, Toyota. You got it.
The beauty of a dynamic 2.2-liter engine.
You got it.
The beauty of a smooth as silk 5-speed overdrive transmission.
You got it, Toyota.
The Celica experience. Form, function, beauty, harmony, quality.
Toyota, you have got it.
You ask for it.
You got it, Toyota.
We're filming a TV commercial in a laundromat, and Mrs. Wills doesn't know she's on camera. Mrs. Wills, I'll give you $50 for that sweatshirt.
Why, sure.
We're doing this to prove a point. I'm going to tear. I'm going to tear. I'm gonna tear.
Maverick Sweatshirts, made from Crestland acrylic and cotton. You can't buy a more durable, more comfortable shirt at any price. Available at most stores where Maverick jeans are sold.
You can have the socks for $10 apiece.
She can turn you to stone, so you better start doing it right. Better start doing it right.
Peter Gabriel told the other members of Genesis of his intent to leave in December of 1974, before the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway tour. When we spoke, I asked Phil Collins if this had cast any negativity on the tour, and what was involved in looking for a second vocalist for Genesis after Peter's departure in August of '76.
Well, we knew we weren't going to stop, but at least that's what we knew. But I mean, we didn't have a singer, you know. I mean, we put an advert in the paper saying, yes, stroke Genesis type group, you know, want a singer. So we got a lot of replies, which were sifted through, and we ended up every Monday or something we'd have 5 or 6 people down, and then we'd carry on rehearsing the rest of the week, and sort of very casually, you know, just have people down. And nobody really looked like, when someone walked in the room, there was no one that you felt like he's the guy that's got to, you know, that's got to be with us, because we were very tight, you know, we still are very tight, and it's not easy for someone to come in on a writing basis or something. And, you know, you've got to feel very positive about people when under that sort of conditions, and no one really sort of stuck out. But we did eliminate it. We had one guy when we went into the studio, which I remember, Mick, I think, something.
I can't remember his name, actually.
We did Squonk.
We did Squonk with him.
I like the Squonk. We had the wrong key for him.
We did it sort of in stages, because we thought Phil, going on what he'd sung in the past, could easily do some of the softer tracks. And you'd never done any kind of screaming, right?
No.
And Pete was always, you know, hot on the screaming. And it was the Squonk track was sort of one of the ones we thought, how do we get around that one? You know, and this guy came in, and that was a low point in the album for me, actually.
Well, actually, it happened. It was quite weird, because I mean, I wasn't there that night.
No,
I was
just trying.
And I came back the next day, and you said, well, he's done it, you know, and you weren't sure about what it's like.
I was there, but I was outside. I mean, I didn't.
It was unfortunate because it was the wrong
poor
key.
guy, it was completely the wrong key for him.
It must have been a nerve-wracking experience anyway. I mean, you know, like, it takes anybody ages to settle down. Singers, you know, in studios, you're singing out of tune, you're overdoing it.
But he was very inexperienced in the studio too, right?
Yeah, right. Well, that's highlighted it. Yeah.
Well, I came in and I thought, well,
and then Phil had a shot, right? And in the first half hour, there was something there, some lines which sort of said like, you know, you could do it.
And one by one, we knocked off all the tracks, you know, until we had actually finished, you know, had the album finished, and we didn't have a singer still, apart from me. And I think we had a cursory look. We had another look for a singer, didn't we?
We thought about it for live. We thought, well, you know, okay, for live we can't have you singing and drumming. So our first thought was, okay, we'll try and find a singer. And then Phil suggested, well, why don't we try and find a drummer? And we thought, well, you know, if you've got the confidence to actually do it out front there, you know. And with, you know, that thought, and we decided to try a bit of rehearsal. I think I actually went into the rehearsal for live with the feeling that there's no chance that Phil would be able to do it. And that was my own feeling, you know. But with Bill Bruford, you know, there, and he was a sort of strong personality, and he kind of, I don't know, it helped. He was you know, he had his, well, he was as doubtful as the rest of us as whether Phil could do it, but it was a kind of general sort of confidence thing. We were all there sort of feeling our way a bit together, and he was quite keen to sort of help us at that point and get involved. And the whole thing sort of, I mean, as soon as we did sort of one gig, really, it was obvious it could make it. It wasn't there, but it would make it.
In the winter of '76, you went to Holland to record the Wind and Wuthering LP in what is seemingly an awful short amount of time, some 12 days to lay down the original tracks, and then
It's 12 days of very potent work there. I mean, it was like
11 in the morning till 3.
The studio in Holland is in the middle of nowhere, 2 hours south of Amsterdam, I think, and there's nothing to do there. I mean, apart from work, which is probably why we enjoyed it. I mean, you just go there.
It was just the boys too, just you know, just on our own with David Henschel and the engineer, and they had a bar. It was a very nice place. But you don't do anything else other than record, really.
So that it wasn't necessarily all first takes. It was just that you had the time to go back and continue.
No, but I mean, you know, we didn't get. I mean, like when we're going back to Nursery Crime, Hogweed, I think, was the 24th take. You know, we don't get into that nowadays. You know, it's normally sort of 2 or 3. I mean, sometimes you get a few silly takes. You know, a person sort of makes a false move after sort of the 5th bar, and he does it 5 times in succession. You know,
suddenly you're on take
and suddenly you find you're on take 24, and you haven't sort of begun. But no, but seriously, there are kind of, you know, we found that some tracks you know, in the recent years have been done in 1 or 2 takes, which is great for us.
You mentioned the EP that did come out. How does a band end up with that? Is it overwriting for a single album and underwriting for a double?
Well, I think we actually started over-recording. Trick of the Tail was the first album I think we've ever over-recorded. We had 1 track left over there, and so we had a choice, you know, and I think that's what happened with the Mothering. We just recorded all the songs we wanted to do and just sort of picked the best, or picked the what, you know. We ended up with an album and 3 tracks. It depends on who you talk to as to whether that was the best.
Who suffers from unknown diseases? Who gets the morning when the sun comes up and makes their beds? Paper clips, bus tickets, all around their heads.
November of '77, you came out with Seconds Out. Would you describe the title of that for us?
Well, it's a boxing
Seconds
term.
Out, round 1.
Seconds Out. We kind of see going on stage a bit like a
version.
fight, you know, going out for the fight, because you sort of key yourself up and you go out on the stage and you sort of
Gladiator.
the whole thing is you're fighting really the music and things, everything all the way through, right? That's how we see it. So we just thought Seconds Out, which means seconds out of the ring, you know. I don't know if that's an American term or not, but in England that means something.
How
I
about
think.
the seconds? Most
Yeah.
of the versions are sort of second versions and stuff. Lots of clever stuff.
It's interesting that you did use it, though, because hardly ever did you have to throw a second band out of the ring to get on stage.
It's true.
Yeah, that's
Have you
true.
seen it before?
That's
That's
the
a
new one.
new one.
What reasons did Steve give you when he felt his time had come to leave the band?
It's fairly simple. I mean, not many, but I mean, basically, I think what happens is, as the years have been ticking by, Tony mentioned it earlier, we mature and expand as people and writers, and it gets harder and harder to fit. Well, at that stage, 4 in the group. You know, as it was the last album with just 3 of us, we had much more material than we needed, and Steve, having done his first solo album, and obviously found a lot of pleasure and satisfaction in that, he wanted to write and record more of his material the following year, you know, and it was very hard to do that in the Genesis structure. So he left to really follow those goals. Simple as that. That's the main thing, really.
Little Nemo rubbed his eyes and got out of bed.
And then there were 3.
Right.
2. You didn't tell him.
Yes.
And that is, of course, your latest album from this year of '78. Was that written almost exclusively to be performed in large concert halls? I believe most of your venues have been 10,000
As
plus.
Mike said it before, we don't write anything don't think about live performance at all. We write totally to please ourselves at the time when we make an album. We just, you know, that's what that album is. We just got into sort of doing slightly shorter songs on this
If we did
particular
think
album.
in those terms, we would never have released an album of short songs. I mean, short songs
don't
go
make
down
live.
well on stage
No.
because the audience hasn't been far enough, you know, since it last applauded. So definitely, we never kind of have any kind of preconceived idea. We basically lumbered with whatever material we got, you know, and that is what an album is, really. I mean, that's the way. And then after that, after it's all finished and it's about to come out, and we realise we've got to go on the road, Tony Smith comes up and says, "Now, 1978's the gigs." Then you realise that you've got to go out and play it, you know. So you think about how you're going to look, what clothes you're going to wear, what makeup, you know.
Yes.
And that's the story of the genesis of Genesis. From 5 friendships through 15 years came a dozen albums, each a progression of a very definite musical creation. Genesis. Tonight's Genesis presentation was conceived and produced by Patrick Griffith. Associate producer, Kevin Kalunian. The show was written by Joe Badriskie and Patrick Griffith. Backstage Limited would especially like to thank the folks at Run It Music. This is Joe Badriskie, hoping you'll join us again for another presentation of the London Wavelength Radio Hour. Good night.
Follow me for the days and nights that we know will be. I will stay